think that he had a real appreciation for the maker's aesthetic. His dad was an Italian woodworker, and he was an art and antiquities dealer. So from the very get-go, Gerard was exposed to treasures from around the world. And in the 1930s, when he met his wife, they almost immediately started traveling all over the world, and they were fascinated by all of these different cultures, and they started collecting their huge collection of folk art objects. Gerard had a history of working with renowned architects. The period that he worked in was called mid-century modern. They really loved to strip architecture of all of the things that we would say were decoration, and to make it sort of a universal constant that would appeal to what they thought would be everyone, and in some ways it was successful. But Gerard did sort of the polar opposite. He really embraced color, and he embraced things that were still handmade and decorative. He looked at the world through an experiential lens. He wanted to see how people related to their place in the world and each other. I mean, Gerard was the one who he invented the conversation pit. In a certain way, he was sort of trying to bring out the emotional response to art and architecture and create conversations. I think that's part of the reason why he was so revered among his peers, and why they made sure to have him in on their projects. He worked a lot with Harvey Harshauer, who was the architect of the Unitarian Church in Albuquerque. I think when Harshauer came to him and asked him to do the mural, he knew that the Unitarians were looking for a way to storytell about their value system. I think that that's why Gerard was hired to come in and reinterpret the symbols in ways that connected to the place. Every aspect of it was done by hand.
And they showed him two pieces of art that the congregation already owned. One was something that the high school class had done, which was a mosaic piece of symbols of the world's great religions. And the other was a ceramic piece that an artist in the congregation had done and given to the congregation that was a similar kind of a thing. And they showed him those two pieces and said, "We want something like this." And I think from then on, he was free to do, what his artistic soul suggested.
He and his son went out into the wilds of New Mexico and found these places and bought these barns from these old ranchers and then hand disassembled them. They didn't bring in a crew of people. It was him and his son unmaking, and they documented it as they unmade, and they took each piece down and put a piece of cardboard between it. Can you imagine how much cardboard they had to use to have all of these pieces of wood, and loaded them on the trailer and brought them down to Santa Fe? They cut them into 3-inch pieces of wood and wove it together like a quilt, and brought in all of the symbols, but in new ways. So when you run your hand over the mural, it's almost like history is reaching out and touching you every time you touch a new tile.
One of the things things that kind of surprised the congregation when the mural got put up was that there was a heart, which no one associated with any of the world's great religions. And I guess they asked him about it because I've seen a paragraph that he wrote about it, telling the congregation that he felt that the heart was a very important religious symbol because it talked about our relationships with each other and the kind of the feeling part of life and how important that is. There's another non-religious symbol on there, which is the star. I always think of that as the Star of Bethlehem myself, but apparently that's not what he had in mind. He had it in mind as a symbol of transcendence, not necessarily associated with any particular religion. He must have really felt strongly that that heart and star had something to say that was not being said by all these other older, more venerable symbols, and so he put it in. And I think the congregation liked that brashness of artistic thought.
He has compassion towards the art and towards the things that he creates, and he honors the traditions while still being playful. It's almost like we could have become complacent, and because we'd seen something so many times that we don't see it anymore, and he gives us a way of seeing the same thing but in a new way that also elicits an emotional response to us and reminds us of our relationship to the thing, whatever it is that we're observing. I think that that's part of his legacy, is that he made art personal again.
The people of the congregation feel really strongly about this mural. It has such a great warmth to it, and the fact that it's wood from New Mexico that was cut, but it wasn't, the colors weren't changed or anything. The care that he took in doing that, it says this is important. It says this vision is important, this place is important, it's important to be here. I mean, it adds to the kind of weight of the room to have a beautiful piece of art in it. It's kind of like a quilt that you can wrap around you that kind of encompasses everybody and kind of keeps us thinking of ourselves as a part of a community, not just a bunch of people sitting in rows.
Sometimes there's more